Welcome to Field Notes, the monthly podcast of modern steel construction, the monthly magazine of AISC. I'm your host, Jeff Weisenberger. This month's guest is Gary Stein, CEO of Triple S Steel, one of the country's largest steel service centers and distributors. And if you've ever wondered what the three S's stand for, keep listening, you're going to find out soon. Gary, we've talked on the phone and via email in the past, but it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Thanks for being here, or rather, thanks for having me at one of your facilities. Let's start from the beginning. I mean, I know there's different beginnings, but let's start from the beginning of your family's history in this business. So I understand your dad founded the company, but then your grandfather started a company before, from what I understand, back in the 30s, and it was Dixie Iron and Metal. And then from there, I hear you have Russian ancestors that may have been blacksmiths. I don't know if you...
That is certainly the family legend.
Okay.
We have no pictures of blacksmiths. We have one that might have been a picture of a blacksmith.
Mm-hmm.
But really, we have no written history of our time in Russia. My dad's dad came over about 1912.
Okay.
And that's, we say our family's an American story. That's when it began.
Sure.
And, but yeah, I mean, if they were in fact blacksmiths, and my grandfather was in fact in the scrap metal business, my father, he's still in the steel business 7 days a week. He's 86.
Oh, wow.
And so I always say our family's been in the steel business so long, when we stand in the rain, we rust.
Hopefully you're weathering steel, though.
No, we like good old rusty steel.
Just good old, yeah. That's amazing. I'm curious that the whole idea of the blacksmith, is that like, was that something that was passed down? I mean, you said there's no written history. Is it just more like the idea of it?
Yeah, no, and we do have one picture that looks like it might have been a blacksmith.
That's
shop.
right. Gotcha. That's cool.
But the American side of the story, my grandfather being in scrap metal, my father starting out in used and surplus metals, and then us building steel service centers. That is a 3-generation story that has been played out any number of times in the United States. We weren't the first, we weren't the only. There were lots of immigrant stories like that, where they came over from Europe, they were peddlers, they got in scrap metal business, and then 2 generations later, they were steel distributors.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's sort of like you're each generation sort of taking the existing business and taking it up to the next level, so to speak. So, I mean, it sounds like you were born for this, or destined for it, so to speak.
Probably.
Well, so on that note, so your whole professional life, have you been working for Triple S, or did you seek your fortune elsewhere and then kind of find your way back?
And when I was 13, I worked at a camera store.
Okay.
My whole professional and not very professional life has been in the steel business. So I graduated from UT on a Saturday, moved home to Houston on Sunday, went to work on Monday, and that afternoon my dad made me the president of the company.
Did you know he was going to do that?
No. And he was only 45 and I was only 22 when that happened.
Okay. So, was that intimidating?
No. Look, I am blessed in the relationships I have with my family and my brothers, my late mother, my dad. My mother worked in our business as well. My father wanted a nice business that made a living for his family and didn't want a big business. And I think in a way that was sort of really visionary and empathetic and loving. My dad said, I don't want to fight with my son. And I've seen this movie before, talking about movies earlier, where the dad and the son fight and ultimately split because they can't work together.
Sure.
My dad didn't want that. And so he said, here's the ball, son, run with it. If you fumble, I will be behind you to pick it up. And I see him if I'm in Houston, I see him every day. I saw my mother every day because she worked as our credit manager until she passed away about 11 years ago. And, it's been a family business can either be, blessing or curse, and we got blessed.
Sure.
And, now we're trying to figure out how to do this with the next generation of our family. We've obviously done a little different. Nobody's going to graduate from college and become the president of a company the size of ours on day one.
Right. But probably a good move.
But we also have told all the members of the next generation of our family, since they were really little, nobody gets their first job here.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go out, get hired, fired, take vacations on somebody else's schedule,
Mm-hmm.
learn what it's like to work, and bring something back to this company.
Sure.
And so we've pretty much enforced that. There are 2 members of the next generation working for us, my oldest son and 1 nephew.
So, and I understand you have 2 brothers who are also in the business
Only
as well.
one is active in the steel company today. About 16 years ago, my middle brother came to me and said he wanted to do something different. So we spun off what was then our fabrication accessories business to my brother Brad. And Brad is still a shareholder in Triple S. And David is still my equal partner in Triple S.
Mm-hmm.
David and I are in Triple S. We own shares in Bradley's company. Bradley owns shares in our company.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the familial divorce. We still love each other. We
Sure.
just work in different offices.
It occurs to me that some of our audience might not know the difference between a steel fabricator and a steel service center. So could you maybe describe what Triple S does in the market as a service center?
We're merchants.
Mm-hmm.
We buy steel and we sell. We keep big inventories, and we do some processing. We do plate burning and drilling and sawing and shearing and some bending. But we don't, as a business, really create. Steel comes off the truck, steel goes back on the truck, right? And our customers get to create things. They get to build baseball stadiums and warehouses and airports and hospitals and schools and churches and synagogues and libraries, and they get to see the fruits of the labor of their hands. And we don't get to do that. We just load it on a truck, go, yeah, we supplied steel for that building, but when it left us, it just looked like a truckload of beams. So in a way, I'm very envious of fabricators. I've always wanted to be a fabricator, but I can't, right? That's what our customers do.
Right.
We buy a lot of companies. We'll never buy a fabricator, right? So mostly everything we do involves cutting of some sort.
Right.
We manufacture metal deck at one plant out in the east, but pretty much, but we don't weld anything.
Sure.
That's the
line.
Rubicon we won't cross.
Sure, right. I think I read one point you said you're not an executive, you're a salesperson. When did you kind of figure out that you were good at being a salesperson?
Oh, I didn't say I was good. I just said that's what I was.
Okay.
No, when I was a little kid, and Triple S was this little company.
Mm-hmm.
It was my dad and 2 guys loading trucks. That was the whole company. And, I'd work in the summers. I'd be 5, 6, 7 years old, and people would come in our yard and they'd say, I need a piece of plate to fix my tractor. And I'd help them find that piece of plate to fix their tractor in our yard, because that's what it was, just a yard.
Yeah.
And, I like helping people. I like helping people solve their problems.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about, writing an order and making a margin. It's about helping people solve a problem or fill the need or creatively come to a solution. That's the fun part.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And that's rewarding.
Yeah,
it's rewarding for you. It's rewarding for them.
Yeah, if I had sold them steel at the price that made sense for them to do a job, and they made some money on the job and we made some money on the steel, everybody wins, and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. When you said your dad wasn't necessarily interested in building a big business, so when did it start getting big, I guess? Are there certain kind of spot points where you're oh, this is going to be, you're huge now, but when did you start to think that's actually going to happen? Right from day one?
So I took over in '83. We grew nicely. We survived the wreckage of the savings and loan crisis and the collapse of the oil field in Houston, because we were mostly a surplus steel dealer. So the collapse of the oil field created a lot of surplus inventories. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I did, I ran around the country and I'd buy inventories like bankrupt companies, and I would sit in their then closed offices with a rotary dial phone. I would just get on the phone and say, "Hi, Jeff, this is Gary Stein of Triple S Steel. You might be in Oklahoma City." And so that was one place we did. I just bought this list of inventory. Whatever you're paying 20 cents a pound for, I'll sell it to you now for 10. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not interested. Bang. There's just a lot of dialing for dollars.
Sure.
So that we built some capital around that in the 80s, around all the distress in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then we grew, modestly. In '85, we opened our second store in San Antonio. In 1998, we bought a company in New Orleans. It didn't work out. We closed it down. And then in 2002, a company called Metals USA, which is today part of Reliance, but it wasn't at the time. They were in bankruptcy. And we bought most of their Texas assets of a company called Insul Steel.
Sure.
And Insul, they were really a great beam distributor. We didn't sell many beams back when we were small Triple S. And Insul is the company that shifted us from being more of a retail merchant to a wholesale beam distributor.
Okay.
And then so Insul was the first RNS Steel, which is what this is. This is now called Insul Steel West.
Right.
But this was called RNS. Denver was our second acquisition, Denver and Salt Lake.
Okay.
And another one in Salt Lake in 06. So that time frame sort of 02 to 06 really cemented our position in the beam business.
Okay.
And then there have been a few more acquisitions and some organic stuff since then.
Okay. Have you all ventured outside of steel to other metals?
Yeah, we have a division called Arbor Metals, which is mostly stainless steel and aluminum, and we made a small acquisition in Pennsylvania that is mostly copper and brass.
Okay.
But we're 85-90% steel.
Was there any interest amongst any of your kids in becoming like a designer or a fabricator? Did anybody want to be an engineer or architect?
I encouraged one of them to study engineering. He went a different path. He actually did get a degree in computer science.
Okay.
So he's still a computer engineer.
Sure. That's good.
And he's got his own startup now, so he's not in our business.
Okay. But hopefully doing well.
Yeah, he's off to the races.
So, and your dad, you said, is still working. Did you say 7 days a week? Hopefully not every week.
He thinks about it 7 days a week, but he is in the office because he takes responsibility for our retail store operations in Houston. So that is, in a little while we're having the grand opening of this tiny little retail store here on the side in Denver, but in Houston we have a giant showroom.
I gotcha.
It's like an auto parts store on steroids. A big long sales counter and lots of small fabricators and welders. Contractors come, literally they're placing an order for 2 beams, 3 flat bars, and a piece of square tubing, and they're going around to the plant and getting loaded. And so we have about 10 or 12 salespeople on this counter, and my dad runs that retail store.
Oh, wow.
And it's open till noon on Saturdays.
Okay.
So my father is there 6 days a week.
Gotcha.
And he is loving what he does.
Is there any piece of advice that that sticks with you that he's given you over the years? I'm sure he's probably given you loads
of it.
Yeah.
But really, it's just love people, not things. Just love on people, treat them right, treat them the way you want to be treated, and they'll keep coming back.
Yeah.
And but lots of little things over the years. I remember I'm like 10 or 12 years old, and I'm writing up some little order on the sales counter back at our old junkyard. And, Dad would always say, if you got enough money, don't take his last $5, right? Figure, adjust your price, whatever. Don't take anybody's last $5. That sticks with me.
Ooh, I like that one. Yeah.
But then lots of little, but really it's just about love on people, make people feel good about themselves, treat them right, deal fairly, don't screw anybody on a price, don't try to make the most money because you want to take care of them tomorrow. And one thing that has never changed at Triple S, as big as we have gotten, there is no minimum order.
Okay.
You take care of that customer today who might buy $10 worth of steel, and tomorrow he might be your biggest customer.
Sure.
You just never know. We've had that happen enough times that there are stories about it where a guy comes into our retail business and buys something, a piece of round bar to tie his wife's tomato plants to. It turns out he was really a purchasing manager for some really big customer. So take care of everything.
Oh, sure.
And we do.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. Well, and I like the experiences, like what you were saying is loving people and just giving them a good experience. I mean, the fact that your dad the candy and the toys and the Halloween, people will remember that. Those kids will remember that when they're older. And that's kind of harder and harder to find these days, especially when most of what we buy is not just walking into a store anymore. Like, yeah, right. Everything's online. Yeah. But it's also a good reminder when you're talking about the retail side of things is like, when we put articles in the magazine, it's a lot of big projects, big fabricators, but you sometimes forget that a lot of the fabricators out there aren't these shops that put 10,000 tons of steel through the shop every year. They might just be
ornamental iron shop.
Right. Yeah. A small business. Yeah.
One of our largest fabricator customers in Houston started out making burglar bars.
Oh, you said burglar bars?
Yeah.
Oh, like
window guards.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, lots of our customers today, a couple big oil field fabricators, they start out as little small welding shops. And somebody gave them an opportunity to do a job, and they did a job, and then they did a bigger job, and then they did a bigger job. And I'm sure that plays throughout the AISC membership.
I know the answer, but I don't know if everybody does. But can you explain what the triple S's, the three S's are?
There's lots of answers. There's not just one. There is just one that's the real answer. I mean, one that I use all the time is Steins sell steel. But the real answer is the three loves of my father's life. His mother, my grandmother, Sarah, his wife, who was my mother, Shirley, and his younger sister, whose name was Charlene, spelled with an S.
With an S.
So there's the real triple S answer.
That's excellent, though. It's great that they're kind of, they're always going to be part of the name of the company and the legacy. This has been Modern Steel Construction's Field Notes podcast. Once again, our guest this time around has been Gary Stein of Triple S Steel, and as always, I'm your host, Jeff Weisenberger. Thanks for listening, everyone.